Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Cracks Appear. Will Freeman sat in his office at Riverside Community College, grading papers. The clock on his desk read 6:45 p.m., another late evening. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. The familiar comfort of his cramped office, with its overflowing bookshelves and the faint scent of old books, did little to ease the growing unrest in his mind. The sound of his phone buzzing interrupted his concentration. Another short message from Roxanne. Working late. Don't wait up. Will's jaw tightened. He picked up his phone, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. After a moment's hesitation, he typed, "Everything okay?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, just busy with the Roberts account. Need to focus. We'll set the phone down with deliberate control. This marked the 4th time this week Roxanne had stayed late at her real estate office. The excuses were starting to wear thin, like a favorite shirt that had been washed too many times. "Hey, Professor Freeman?" A student's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "The janitor said they're locking up soon." Will nodded, gathering his papers. "Thanks, Sarah. Have a good evening." Outside, the summer heat lingered despite the late hour. Will's phone buzzed again. This time it was Luther, his best friend since their days throwing rocks at abandoned buildings in their youth. "Hey brother, got some extra work at the site tomorrow if you're interested. Could use another pair of hands." Will smiled. The construction work had become his refuge lately, a place where problems had simple solutions and progress was measured in concrete terms. "Count me in." "Same time?" "You know it. Bring your work boots and that mean right hook of yours." The drive home took him past Roxanne's office. Her car was still in the parking lot, but the building was dark except for one window on the 3rd floor. Will's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, but he drove past without stopping. At home, 16-year-old Cassie sat at the kitchen counter, textbooks spread around her like a paper fortress. She looked up when he entered, her face brightening. "Dad, I was hoping you'd be home for dinner." "Wouldn't miss it, kiddo." Will dropped his briefcase and joined her at the counter. "What's giving you trouble tonight?" "AP History. We're covering the French Revolution, and I can't keep all these political factions straight." Will pulled up a chair, falling easily into teacher mode. "Let's break it down. Start with the main players." They spent the next hour discussing historical alliances and betrayals while sharing leftover lasagna. Will watched his daughter's quick mind at work, pride momentarily displacing his earlier unease. Cassie had inherited his love of history and her mother's sharp intelligence, though lately he found himself hoping she'd inherited more from him than her mother. "Mom's working late again?" Cassie asked, trying to sound casual. "Big account," Will replied, keeping his voice neutral. "How about we watch that documentary you mentioned?" Later that night, Will sat alone in his study, a glass of bourbon untouched beside him. He pulled out his laptop and opened his banking app. The numbers stared back at him, perfectly ordinary yet somehow wrong. He'd been tracking their accounts more closely lately, a habit born from growing suspicion rather than financial prudence. The front door opened at 11:42 p.m. Will remained in his study, listening to Roxanne's movements. Heels clicking on tile, keys dropping in the ceramic bowl by the door, the soft whoosh of the refrigerator opening and closing. Her footsteps approached his study. Will didn't look up when she appeared in the doorway. "You're still up." Her voice carried a note of surprise, tinged with something else. "Irritation?" "Grading papers," Will replied, though his screen showed bank statements rather than student essays. Roxanne lingered in the doorway, her silhouette uncertain. "The Roberts account is proving complicated. But the commission will be worth it." Will finally looked at her. Her makeup was perfect, not a smudge out of place despite the late hour. Her blouse was crisp, unwrinkled. She looked like she'd just started her day rather than finished it. "Complicated how?" he asked, voice level. Roxanne's hand moved to her neck, a tell she'd had since high school when she was about to lie. "Just some paperwork issues. Nothing exciting." She forced a smile. "I'm exhausted. Coming to bed?" "In a bit." She hesitated, then turned away. Will waited until her footsteps faded before returning to the banking app. He clicked through their joint accounts, credit card statements, mortgage payments. Everything looked normal on the surface. But Will hadn't spent 20 years teaching history without learning to spot patterns, to see the small inconsistencies that often revealed larger truths. His phone buzzed with a text from Luther. 6 a.m. sharp, brother. Bring your A game. Will sent back a thumbs-up emoji, then closed his laptop. Tomorrow he'd swing by the bank during his lunch break. Something wasn't adding up, and Will Freeman had never been one to ignore his instincts. The next morning, Will was up before sunrise, his routine unchanging despite the growing tension in his household. Coffee brewed at 6:15 a.m., the same brand he'd been drinking for years. He packed his lunch, left a note for Cassie about dinner, and headed out to meet Luther at the construction site. The physical labor helped clear his head. Luther had him hauling lumber and checking measurements, tasks that required focus but left room for conversation. "How's Roxanne?" Luther asked during their break, not quite meeting Will's eyes. "Busy with work," Will replied, studying his friend's face. "You've seen her around town?" Luther shrugged, suddenly very interested in his sandwich. "Here and there. You know how it is in a small town." Will did know. He also knew when his oldest friend was holding something back. The rest of the day passed in a blur of concrete dust and sweat. Will was just finishing up when his phone rang, an unknown number. "Is this William Freeman?" "Speaking." "Mr. Freeman, my name is Timothy Bautista. I believe we need to discuss a rather urgent financial matter. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning?" Will's instincts, already on high alert, began screaming. "What's this regarding?" "A loan agreement bearing your signature. I think it's best we discuss the details in person. Shall we say 9 a.m. at your office?" Will agreed, his mind already racing through possibilities. That night, when Roxanne announced another late meeting, he didn't argue. Instead, he spent the evening in his study, pulling up old bank statements and credit reports, preparing for whatever tomorrow might bring. The Timothy Bautista who walked into Will's office the next morning wore success like a second skin. Tailored suit, manicured nails, shoes that cost more than Will's monthly salary. But there was something predatory in his smile that set Will's teeth on edge. "Mr. Freeman," Bautista began, placing a folder on Will's desk. "I have here a loan agreement for $500,000, co-signed by you 3 months ago. Payment is due in 30 days. Will didn't reach for the folder. "I haven't signed any loan agreements." Bautista's smile didn't waver. "Your signature suggests otherwise." He opened the folder and slid a document across the desk. Will examined the paper. The signature did look like his, close enough to fool a casual observer. But Will knew his own handwriting, knew the slight leftward slant of his letters, the way he crossed his T's. This was good work, but it wasn't his. "This is a forgery," Will stated flatly. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Freeman. One that could have unpleasant consequences." Bautista's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes had gone cold. 30 days, Mr. Freeman. I'm sure a man of your intelligence can appreciate the importance of meeting deadlines." After Bautista left, Will sat at his desk, rage building in his chest. Someone had forged his signature, set him up for a fall, and he had a sickening feeling he knew who was behind it. That evening, he drove to Roxanne's office again. This time, he parked and waited. At 8:45 p.m., she emerged with a stack of files, phone pressed to her ear. Will watched as she loaded everything into her car and drove away, not toward home, but in the opposite direction. Will followed at a discreet distance. 15 minutes later, Roxanne pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Inn, a mid-range hotel on the outskirts of town. Will parked across the street and watched as she grabbed her briefcase and disappeared inside. His phone buzzed. Luther again. "Still on for tomorrow morning?" Will stared at the message, then at the hotel entrance where his wife had vanished. 20 years of friendship, of trust, suddenly felt very fragile. Something came up, he typed back. "Rain check." The next few days passed in a blur of investigation and mounting evidence. Will contacted banks, pulled records, and piece by piece, a picture emerged that made his blood run cold. Large sums moving between accounts, forged documents, a web of deception that had been months, possibly years, in the making. He hired Patty Lopez, a lawyer recommended by a colleague. She took one look at the loan agreement and frowned. "This is sophisticated work," she said, examining the signature. Someone knew what they were doing. "But if we can prove it's a forger..." The police arrived before they could finish their meeting. Two officers, grim-faced and professional, hands on their belts. "William Freeman? You're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement." Will stood slowly, mind racing. Through the office window, he caught a glimpse of Roxanne in the parking lot, talking to Timothy Bautista. Their heads were close together, and for a moment, Bautista's hand rested on her arm in a gesture that spoke of familiarity. As the officers let him out, Will's thoughts weren't on the charges, or the handcuffs biting into his wrists. He was thinking about patterns, about betrayal, about the way his wife hadn't seemed surprised when she saw him being led away. Most of all, he was thinking about revenge. Chapter 2. The Accusation. The interrogation room at the police station smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Detective Sarah Martinez sat across from Will, her dark eyes studying him with professional detachment as she laid out photographs and documents on the metal table. "Let's go through this again, Mr. Freeman," she said, tapping a finger on a bank statement. $500,000 was transferred from your wife's real estate company account to Mr. Bautista's private account. Your signature authorized the transfer. Want to explain that? Will met her gaze steadily. "That's not my signature. Our forensics team disagrees." Martinez slid another document forward, a detailed analysis of the signature comparison. "They say it's a 98% match. Then your forensics team needs better equipment," Will replied, his voice hard. "I didn't sign anything." Martinez leaned back, crossing her arms. "You teach history at Riverside Community College, correct? Salary approximately $65,000 a year. Yet we found evidence of recent large purchases, a vacation home in the Cayman Islands, a boat, several high-end vehicles. All under your name." Will's jaw tightened. Someone had been busy creating a paper trail, and he had a good idea who. "I don't own any of those things. The documentation suggests otherwise." Martinez paused, studying his face. "Your wife seems to think you've been under a lot of pressure lately. Talking about early retirement, making big plans." "Did my wife mention where she was 2 nights ago?" Will asked quietly. "The Riverside Inn, perhaps?" Martinez's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Freeman, you're facing serious charges. This isn't the time to make unfounded accusations." "Nothing I've said is unfounded, detective. But you're right about one thing. Someone has been under pressure. Someone has been planning something. Just not who you think." The door opened, and Patty Lopez strode in, briefcase in hand. "This interview is over. My client won't be answering any more questions without me present." After the detective left, Patty turned to Will. "They've got a strong circumstantial case. The signature analysis, the financial records, the purchases. Someone did their homework." "Roxanne," Will said flatly. "She's behind this. That's a serious accusation to make about your wife. Do you have proof?" "Not yet, but I will." Will leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "What are my options?" Patty spread her hands. "Right now? Not great. The evidence against you is circumstantial but convincing. We need something concrete to prove your innocence. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you'll be held until your arraignment. I'll try to get bail set, but with the amount involved..." She left the sentence hanging. Will nodded, his mind already working through scenarios. "I need you to do something for me, Patty. Check into Timothy Bautista's background. Something about him isn't right. I'll look into it. But Will..." Patty hesitated. "Be careful. These people, whoever they are, they're organized. They're connected. And they've clearly been planning this for a while." Will smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "So have I, Patty. They just don't know it yet." The next few days in county jail gave Will plenty of time to think. He observed everything. The guards' routines, the dynamics between inmates, the subtle power structures that govern life behind bars. He made no friends, started no conversations. He watched, and he planned. Roxanne visited him on the 3rd day. She wore a conservative black dress and managed to look both concerned and slightly afraid as she sat across from him in the visitor's room. "Will," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't understand what's happening. The police say. They say you've been stealing money, making illegal deals." Will studied her face, the careful makeup, the practiced expression of distress. How many times had she practiced this performance in front of a mirror? "Interesting choice of hotel," he said quietly. "The Riverside Inn, room 412, wasn't it?" Roxanne's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "What are you talking about?" "You tell me, Roxanne. Tell me about Timothy Bautista. Tell me about the loan agreement. Tell me about all of it. You're not making sense." Roxanne reached across the table, trying to take his hand. Will pulled back before she could touch him. "Will, please. Let me help you. Like you helped set me up?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "I trusted you, Roxanne. Remember that." Tears welled in her eyes. Perfect timing, Will noted clinically. "I don't know what's happened to you," she whispered. "You're not the man I married." "No," Will agreed. "I'm not. And you're not the woman I married. The difference is, I know exactly what I am." The tears spilled over. "Cassie needs you home. She's devastated." "Don't." Will's voice cut like a blade. "Don't you dare use our daughter against me." A guard approached. "Time's up." Roxanne stood, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I'll be back tomorrow. We'll figure this out, Will. I promise." Will watched her leave, noting the way her shoulders straightened as soon as she thought he couldn't see her anymore. The performance was over, but the play was just beginning. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. Will sat in the courtroom, listening as the prosecution laid out their case. The evidence was damning. Bank transfers, property purchases, suspicious meetings with known criminals. All carefully documented, all pointing to him. Then Luther took the stand. Will's oldest friend wouldn't meet his eyes as he was sworn in. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at his collar as he answered questions about their friendship, their work together, their conversations. "Mr. Braun," the prosecutor began, "did the defendant ever discuss his financial situation with you?" Luther shifted in his seat. "Yeah, sometimes. He said things were tight, that he was tired of living paycheck to paycheck." "Did he ever mention specific plans to acquire money quickly?" the prosecutor continued. Luther's hands twisted in his lap. He mentioned wanting to make some big changes. Said he had plans to get ahead. "Could you be more specific about these plans?" "Objection." Leading the witness, Patty called out. "Overruled. The witness may answer." Luther swallowed hard. He talked about knowing people who could help him make quick money. Said he was tired of playing by the rules when everyone else was getting rich. Will sat perfectly still, his face a mask of stone. Each word from Luther's mouth was a betrayal, a carefully constructed lie that fit perfectly into the prosecution's narrative. "And did Mr. Freeman discuss any specific amounts?" "He mentioned needing at least $500,000 to start. Said he had a contact who could help him move the money around, make it look clean." The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. No further questions. During cross-examination, Patty did her best to discredit Luther's testimony, pointing out inconsistencies and highlighting the lack of concrete evidence. But the damage was done. Will watched the jury's faces. They believed Luther, believed the story of a desperate man driven to crime by greed. That evening in his cell, Will received a visit from his daughter. Cassie's eyes were red from crying, but her chin was set in a determined line. "Dad," she said, pressing her hand against the glass partition, "I know you didn't do this." Will placed his hand opposite hers. "I didn't, sweetheart. Someone set me up." "Mom's been acting weird," Cassie said, lowering her voice. "She's always on the phone, speaking quietly. And Uncle Luther." She hesitated. "What about Luther?" "He comes by the house a lot now. When he thinks I'm not around, he and Mom, they talk differently to each other. Not like before." Will's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm for his daughter's sake. "What do you mean, differently?" "Like they're sharing a secret." "Dad, something's wrong. Really wrong." "I know, sweetheart. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to pretend everything's normal. Can you do that?" Cassie nodded. her eyes showing a maturity beyond her years. What are they going to do to you? Don't worry about that. I'll handle it. Just remember, whatever happens, whatever you hear, I love you. That's never going to change. After Cassie left, Will lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The pieces were coming together: Roxanne, Luther, Timothy Bautista. A conspiracy designed to destroy him, to take everything he had. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They left his daughter out of their calculations. Chapter 3. The Sentence and the Betrayal. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing. Will stood before the judge, his back straight, his face impassive. Behind him, he could feel Roxanne's presence, could practically taste the false concern she was projecting for the court's benefit. Judge Malcolm Harrison peered down from his bench, reading from the sentencing document. Mr. Freeman, you have been found guilty of serious crimes. The evidence presented shows a calculated attempt to defraud and embezzle substantial sums of money. While your previous clean record has been taken into consideration, Will tuned out the judge's voice, focusing instead on the subtle movements behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know that Luther was sitting next to Roxanne, offering silent support. His best friend and his wife, united in their betrayal. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 3 years in a medium-security correctional facility. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom. Will heard Roxanne's perfectly timed gasp of distress, heard the murmurs of the spectators. But his attention was fixed on Patty Lopez, who was already preparing their appeal. "We'll fight this," she whispered as he was led away. "The evidence is circumstantial. We can't. No, we'll cut her off. No appeals. But Will, save your energy, Patty. There are other battles coming." The processing into prison was a blur of paperwork, fingerprints, and institutional clothing. Will maintained his composure throughout, speaking only when necessary, observing everything. He was assigned to Cell Block D, a section housing nonviolent offenders. His first night in his permanent cell, Will received a message through the prison's computer system. It was from Cassie, marked urgent. His hands were steady as he opened it, but what he read made his blood run cold. "Hey, Dad, remember your best friend Tom, who testified against you? He and Mom just announced they've been secretly married for 6 months, while you were in prison awaiting trial. They've been planning this since before she hired that hitman to kill you, the one who confessed and cleared your name." Will read the message 3 times, each word burning itself into his brain. Not Tom, Luther. The name was wrong, but the truth was clear. His wife and best friend, married. The conspiracy deeper than he'd imagined. And a hitman, a failed attempt on his life. He sat on his bunk, letting the rage wash through him in waves. Each breath brought new clarity, new purpose. They hadn't just tried to destroy his life, they tried to end it. And now they thought they'd won, thought he was safely contained while they enjoyed their victory. Will smiled in the darkness of his cell, and if any of his enemies had seen that smile, they would have run. Because it wasn't the smile of a beaten man. It wasn't even the smile of an angry man. It was the smile of a man who had just found his true purpose. The next morning, Will began his new routine. Exercise in the yard, meals in the cafeteria, hours in the prison library. To the guards and other inmates, he appeared to be adapting well, accepting his fate. They couldn't see him studying legal texts late into the night, couldn't see him making careful notes about prison routines and personnel. They couldn't see him watching, learning, planning. Every detail filed away, every weakness noted. When Roxanne sent a letter expressing her regret at how things had turned out, Will read it carefully, noting the careful choice of words, the subtle implications. She was covering her tracks, creating a paper trail of concern and support. He folded the letter precisely and added it to his growing collection of evidence. Luther never wrote, never visited. Will hadn't expected him to. Betrayal complete. The man who had been his best friend since childhood had moved on to claim his prize. Will's wife, Will's life. But they had forgotten something essential about Will Freeman. They had forgotten that beneath his quiet exterior, beneath the professor's tweeds and the father's gentle smile, there was steel. They had forgotten that a man who studied history understood the architecture of revenge, the patience required for true retribution. Most of all, they had forgotten that they hadn't killed him. Chapter 4. the quiet rage. The metal bars of cell block D clanged shut behind Will Freeman. His new home measured 8 by 10 feet, with a narrow bunk and a stainless steel toilet sink combination. The previous occupant had left behind faded pinups and religious pamphlets, which Will immediately tore down. "Freeman," the guard called out. "Yard time in 5. Will nodded, his face expressionless. Prison routine was simple: wake up, eat, exercise, work detail, sleep, repeat. The simplicity suited him. It gave him time to think, to plan, to observe. In the yard, Will claimed a spot against the fence, watching the other inmates. Groups had formed based on unspoken rules: the drug dealers near the basketball court, the white-collar criminals by the weight bench, the violent offenders dominating the center space. Will belonged to none of them. "Hey, Professor," a voice called out. "Need some protection?" Will turned to face a muscular man with prison tattoos covering his arms. "No." "Wasn't really asking." The man stepped closer, flanked by 2 others. "Smart guy like you should understand how things work in here." Will's muscles tensed, but his voice remained calm. "Walk away." The man laughed, reaching for Will's shoulder. What happened next was quick, efficient, and brutal. Will grabbed the outstretched hand, twisted it backward until tendons popped, and drove his knee into the man's solar plexus. As the 2 others rushed forward, Will used their momentum against them, sending one face first into the fence while the other caught an elbow to the throat. Guards rushed in, whistles blowing. Will put his hands up, already assuming the position. As they cuffed him, he noticed other inmates watching. Good. The message had been sent. 2 weeks in solitary gave Will more time to think. He used it well, working out in his cell, running through scenarios in his mind. When he returned to general population, the dynamics had shifted. No one approached him directly anymore, but he noticed the quiet respect in their eyes. That's when he met Marcus Rodriguez, the failed hitman. Marcus was serving time for a string of petty crimes, but the look in his eyes when he saw Will told a different story. Will cornered him in the laundry room during work detail. "You know who I am." Marcus tried to back away, but Will had positioned himself between the man and the door. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." Too late. Will's voice was soft, almost gentle. "You were hired to kill me." Marcus swallowed hard. "I didn't go through with it, but you know who hired you." "It wasn't a question. They'll kill me if I talk." Will smiled, and Marcus took another step back. "They're out there. I'm in here. With you. Think about that." Over the next few weeks, Will became Marcus's shadow. When other inmates tried to hassle the smaller man, Will intervened. When Marcus needed extra food from the commissary, Will provided it. Protection came with a price: information. Mrs. Freeman contacted me through a mutual acquaintance. Marcus finally admitted one day during yard time. Said her husband was becoming unstable, dangerous. Needed to be dealt with before he hurt someone. "She paid you?" "Half up front." Luther delivered it. Said it was insurance money or something. "I was supposed to make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Will's knuckles whitened, but his voice remained steady. "Why didn't you go through with it?" "Got spooked. Something felt off about the whole thing. Then I got picked up for another job, ended up in here." "You have proof? Records of the arrangement?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Kept everything. Insurance, you know? Phone recordings, text messages, even photos of the cash handoff. It's all hidden away." Will leaned closer. "I want it all. What's in it for me? You confess, clear my name, give me everything you have, and I make sure you survive in here. Plus, when I'm done with them, you get a cut." Marcus studied Will's face. "You're really going after them? They're already dead. They just don't know it yet." The confession process took time. Will made sure Marcus understood exactly what to say, what evidence to provide, and when to reveal it. He also made sure other inmates knew that Marcus was under his protection. During this time, Will established a routine. He spent hours in the prison library, studying law books, financial regulations, and, most importantly, the art of revenge. He took notes in a small journal, writing in a code he'd developed based on historical ciphers. Other inmates began to notice Will's presence, his controlled strength. They saw how he handled problems, not with brute force, but with calculated precision. Some began to offer their services, recognizing the power of a man with nothing left to lose. Mike Chun, a former hacker serving time for cyber fraud, approached Will during lunch. Heard you might need some technical expertise on the outside. What makes you think that? Same way I know your wife's real estate company uses outdated security protocols. Same way I know your friend Luther's construction business runs on a network my kid's sister could hack. Will took another bite of his food. Go on. I've got people on the outside. Good people. They can get into systems, plant evidence, create paper trails, or expose existing ones. Mike grinned. Now you're thinking like a criminal. No, Will corrected him. I'm thinking like someone who wants justice. Through Marcus and Mike, Will began building his network. Each contact was carefully vetted, each relationship based on mutual benefit rather than trust. He learned about document forging from a former art fraudster, studied combat techniques from an ex-military inmate, and absorbed everything he could about the criminal underworld. During family visitation days, Will received regular updates from Cassie. She would talk about school, about her life, but her eyes told him what he needed to know. She was watching, gathering intelligence about Roxanne and Luther's movements. Mom bought a new house, she mentioned during one visit. With Luther, they think I don't know about their meetings before. Before everything happened, Will reached across the table, touching his daughter's hand. You're doing good, sweetheart. Just keep your eyes open and your mouth shut. When are you getting out? Soon. And when I do, everything changes. As the months passed, Will's transformation continued. His body hardened from regular exercise, his mind sharpened by constant study and planning. He kept detailed records of everything: guard rotations, inmate connections, outside contacts. Each piece of information was a potential weapon in his arsenal. The day Marcus made his official confession, Will watched from his cell as the media frenzy began. Local news stations picked up the story. Failed hitman confesses. Professor framed by wife and best friend. The confession didn't immediately free Will. The legal system moved slowly, but it was the first crack in the foundation of Roxanne and Luther's carefully constructed lie. More importantly, it gave Will legitimacy. Other inmates who had been hesitant to align with him now saw an opportunity. I've got a cousin who works security at major hotels, one inmate told him. He can get access to surveillance footage, guest records. Another offered. My brother runs a cleaning service. Rich people talk like you're not even there when you're cleaning their houses. Each offer, each connection, was another piece of the puzzle. Will accepted them all, knowing that in prison, information was more valuable than money. He started compiling files, evidence of Roxanne's real estate frauds, Luther's construction kickbacks, their entire network of lies and deception. The hitman's confession was just the beginning. By the time Will finished, there wouldn't be anywhere left for them to hide. The prison psychiatrist noted in her reports that inmate Freeman showed remarkable adaptation to prison life. She noted his calm demeanor, his structured routine, his apparent acceptance of his situation. What she didn't see was the fire burning behind his eyes, the meticulous planning behind each seemingly mundane action. What she didn't understand was that Will Freeman hadn't adapted to prison. He had transformed it into his war room, and each day brought him closer to launching his campaign. Chapter 5. The Tools of Vengeance. Will's release from prison came on a Tuesday morning. He signed the paperwork with steady hands, collected his few possessions, and walked through the gates without looking back. The prison had served its purpose. It had given him time, resources, and most importantly, a network of people who owed him favors. He bypassed the main entrance where reporters waited, using a service exit his contacts had told him about. A nondescript sedan waited in the parking lot, driven by one of Mike Chin's associates. Mountain View Motel, Will directed. Rooms already booked under the name James Wilson. The motel sat on the outskirts of town, its faded sign and peeling paint making it invisible to most passers-by. Perfect for Will's needs. He'd had Marcus's outside contact set everything up, cash payments, no questions asked. In the room, Will found what he'd requested: laptop, burner phones, and a manila envelope containing $5,000 in cash. His savings from the construction job, kept hidden from Roxanne's greedy hands, would fund the first phase of his plan. He opened one of the burner phones and began making calls. Each number reached someone he'd connected with in prison, each conversation brief and coded. The package needs delivery. Standard rate applies. Construction project is greenlit. Send the crew. Legal documents require processing. Timeline is 48 hours. Within hours, his network activated. The forged documents began appearing in strategic locations. Anonymous tips led regulators to review specific transactions. Will's prison contact, who specialized in document forgery, had created a masterful trail of evidence. Your wife's getting nervous, Ray reported one evening. She's hired private security for their house. Luther's drinking more. Missing work. Will reviewed the surveillance photos. Show me their weak points. She's skimming money from client escrow accounts to cover their expenses. Luther's construction company is cutting corners on materials, bribing inspectors. They're leaving traces everywhere. And Timothy Bautista? Still involved, but keeping his distance. He senses something's wrong. Will nodded, adding notes to his journal. The IT expert had created several fake profiles across various social media platforms, establishing identities that would later expose Roxanne's illegal practices. Each profile had a carefully crafted backstory, complete with years of digital history. The profiles are ready, Sarah confirmed. We've established them as legitimate industry insiders. When they start revealing information, people will listen. Will's combat trainer had prepared him for any physical confrontations. During their sessions, he learned not just fighting techniques, but how to move unnoticed, how to blend into crowds, how to approach targets without alerting them. You're not training for a sport, the trainer reminded him. You're training to protect yourself and eliminate threats. At night, Will coordinated with his team using burner phones and encrypted messages. Each member had specific tasks, timed to create maximum impact. Start with the small accounts, he instructed Sarah. Work up to the bigger frauds. Make it look like their own greed is exposing them. The fake profiles began posting subtle hints about irregularities in local real estate deals. Anonymous comments on industry forums raised questions about specific transactions. Will's team planted evidence of money laundering and loan fraud, making it appear as though Roxanne had grown careless in her success. Luther's construction business faced similar pressure. Building inspectors received anonymous tips about code violations. Suppliers began questioning invoices that didn't match deliveries. Former employees suddenly remembered suspicious activities. Your friend's cracking, Ray reported. He's made 3 trips to his lawyer this week. Roxanne's furious with him for drawing attention. Will monitored their reactions through surveillance feeds. He watched them argue in their driveway, saw the strain in their faces at public events. The pressure was building, exactly as he'd planned. The hidden cameras his team installed captured their private moments, the accusations, the blame, the growing fear. Luther drank more heavily, while Roxanne worked increasingly long hours trying to cover their tracks. She's getting sloppy, Sarah noted. Making mistakes we don't even have to fake. The fear is making her spiral. Will's network of prison contacts provided additional pressure. Former inmates who owed him favors spread rumors about investigations and informants. The criminal underworld began distancing itself from Roxanne's operations. Your wife tried to contact Timothy Bautista yesterday, Ray reported. He wouldn't take her call. Each piece of evidence was carefully crafted and strategically revealed. Will made sure nothing could be traced back to him. As far as the world knew, he was still a disgraced former professor trying to rebuild his life. The local news stations began picking up stories about questionable real estate deals. Industry blogs discussed rumors of fraud. Social media buzzed with speculation about prominent local businesspeople under investigation. Will watched it all from his motel room command center, coordinating his team's movements, timing each revelation for maximum impact. He had transformed from a victim into an architect of destruction, using the very systems that had betrayed him to dismantle his enemies. His network expanded beyond his initial prison contacts. Sarah introduced him to hackers who could penetrate secure systems. Ray's surveillance team provided constant updates on his target's movements. The forger created documents that would withstand any scrutiny. The foundation is laid, Will told his team. Now we start pulling the threads that unravel their world. He monitored Roxanne and Luther's reactions through surveillance feeds, watching as their perfect life began showing cracks. Their expensive house became a prison of paranoia. Their stolen wealth turned into a source of constant fear. Will's revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about making them experience the same helplessness, the same betrayal he had felt. Each day brought new pressures, new revelations, new cracks in their carefully constructed facade. As phase 1 of his plan neared completion, Will reviewed his journal, checking off completed tasks, adjusting timelines. His transformation from wronged husband to ruthless avenger was almost complete. The tools were in place. The network was active. The pressure was building. Phase 2 would begin soon, and with it, the real destruction would commence. He'd met in prison had associates on the outside who specialized in creating untraceable identities. By nightfall, Will had 3 complete sets of identification: driver's licenses, passports, credit cards, all backstopped with digital records that would withstand scrutiny. A knock at the door, the specific pattern he'd arranged. Will opened it to find Ray Lynch, the private investigator recommended by his prison contacts. "You Freeman?" Ray asked, though they both knew the answer. Will gestured him inside. "What do you have for me?" Ray pulled out a tablet. "Your ex-wife and her new husband bought a house in Cedar Hills. 5 bedrooms, pool, private security. They're living large on your misery. Show me everything." For the next 2 hours, Ray walked Will through surveillance photos, financial records, daily routines. Roxanne and Luther had grown careless in their success, leaving trails that Ray's team had easily followed. "She's running bigger scams now," Ray explained, using Luther's construction company to inflate property values, then selling to shell companies they control. The properties get flipped again at higher prices, making their fraud look legitimate. Will studied the documentation. And Timothy Bautista? Still in the picture. He's their connection to some serious players in the real estate market. But he's got weaknesses: gambling debts, a taste for expensive women. Good. Will made notes in his journal. "Keep watching them. I want to know everything. Where they eat, who they meet, what time they brush their teeth." After Ray left, Will contacted Abigail Escobar, the lawyer he'd researched during his time inside. Her reputation for taking down corrupt attorneys made her perfect for his needs. They met in her office after hours. Abigail was younger than Will expected, but her eyes held the same hardened look he'd seen in the mirror. "Why should I help you?" she asked after he'd laid out his situation. "Because you hate lawyers who help criminals escape justice. Because Patty Lopez knew what my wife was doing and helped anyway. Because you want to make an example of them." Abigail leaned back in her chair. "You've done your homework. I had time." She studied him for a long moment. "What exactly do you want?" "I want them destroyed. Not just punished, destroyed. I want their lives dismantled piece by piece until there's nothing left but ruins. That's not justice. That's revenge. In this case, they're the same thing." Abigail smiled. "I have someone you should meet. Former IT specialist who now works freelance. He's particularly good at finding things people want to keep hidden." The IT specialist turned out to be a woman named Sarah Chun, Mike's sister from the outside. She worked from a converted garage filled with computers and monitoring equipment. "Your wife's network security is a joke," Sarah said, fingers flying over keyboards. "And Luther's construction company might as well leave their files on the street. How long to get what we need? To get in? Minutes. To gather everything without leaving traces? A few weeks. To make it look like they exposed themselves through their own mistakes? That's an art form." Will nodded. "Do it right. I want them to destroy themselves." The next phase required physical preparation. Will found a gym that asked no questions and hired a private combat instructor, another connection from his prison network. The trainer, a former special forces operator, pushed Will beyond his limits. "You're not fighting for points," the trainer growled during one session. "You're fighting to end threats permanently." Will absorbed everything: hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical movement. His body, already hardened by prison workouts, became a weapon itself. Between training sessions, he coordinated with his team. Sarah planted digital breadcrumbs, leading to Roxanne's illegal activities. Ray's surveillance documented Luther's meetings with questionable business partners. The forger created documents that would withstand any scrutiny. Each piece was carefully prepared, each component tested and verified. Will's hotel room became a command center, walls covered with photos, documents, and connection maps. Your wife's getting sloppy, Ray reported during one update. She's skimming more money, taking bigger risks. The success has gone to her head. And Luther? Drinking more, arguing with her about exposure risks. He knows they're vulnerable, but can't stop spending the money. Will made another note in his journal. Perfect. The tools of his vengeance were almost ready. Each person on his team had been chosen for their skills and their motivation, usually money, sometimes revenge of their own. None knew the full plan, only their part in it. As Will prepared himself physically and mentally, he received regular updates from Cassie. His daughter had become his eyes inside their home, though he was careful to shield her from the details of his plan. They fight sometimes, she reported during one call. When they think I'm asleep. Luther's scared of something, but Mom just laughs it off. You're doing good, sweetheart. Just remember, you never heard any of this. I know, Dad. I want them to pay for what they did to you. They will. I promise. The final piece came together when Abigail introduced him to her contacts in the media. Reporters hungry for stories about corruption and betrayal. They'll run with anything that has solid documentation, she explained. And we'll have plenty of that. Will stood in his hotel room, surveying the arsenal he'd assembled. Not weapons of steel and gunpowder, but of information and exposure. Each piece had been carefully chosen, each tool perfectly suited to its task. The time for preparation was almost over. Soon, he would begin dismantling the lives of those who had betrayed him, piece by piece, until nothing remained of their ill-gotten gains and false respectability. Will Freeman, the quiet history professor, was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned the true meaning of revenge, who had turned his prison sentence into a master class in destruction. The tools were ready. The weapons were primed. The war was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Setup. Will sat in his motel room, surrounded by monitors displaying surveillance feeds of Roxanne and Luther's movements. 3 burner phones lay on the desk, each dedicated to different aspects of his operation. The wall behind him displayed photos, documents, and connection maps, a war room designed for destruction. Sarah Chin's voice crackled through one of the secure lines. The cyber infiltration is complete. We've mapped their entire network. Begin Phase 1, Will ordered. Start with the small irregularities. Make them look like careless mistakes. Within hours, subtle discrepancies appeared in Roxanne's real estate records. Transaction dates that didn't quite match, property values that showed unexpected variations. Nothing alarming enough to trigger immediate investigation, but sufficient to draw attention from the compliance department. Ray's surveillance team reported growing tension between the targets. Luther's drinking more, Ray noted during their daily briefing. 3 visits to the bar today alone. Your wife's not happy about it. We'll watch the footage of Luther stumbling from his truck. Roxanne's face tight with anger as she met him at the door. Good. Keep pushing. What about their business contacts? They're getting nervous. 2 developers pulled out of deals this week. The anonymous tips about building code violations have people asking questions. The IT experts' work proved invaluable. Fake profiles appeared across industry forums, each with years of manufactured history. These personas began raising subtle questions about specific real estate transactions, creating whispers that spread through professional networks. Your wife tried to track down the source, Sarah reported. She's searching for leaks in her organization. Fired 2 employees yesterday. Will nodded, making notes in his journal. Perfect. She's creating more enemies. What about the document trail? The forger had crafted a masterful set of evidence. Bank transfers, property records, loan agreements, each document told part of the story of their fraud. Will's team planted these strategically, making them appear to be poorly hidden records of illegal transactions. The building inspector received another anonymous tip. Ray confirmed. Luther's construction site got shut down for safety violations. He's losing contracts. Will monitored their reactions through hidden cameras. Roxanne paced their expensive kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, voice rising in frustration. Luther sat in his home office, bottle in hand, staring at financial reports that showed their empire crumbling. Timothy Bautista's getting skittish, Sarah noted. His associates are distancing themselves. The breadcrumbs we planted about money laundering have them spooked. The pressure mounted steadily. Will's combat training served him well as he moved through their social circles in various disguises. At charity events and business functions, he watched them from behind false identities, noting their growing paranoia. "Your wife's making mistakes," Ray reported. "Real ones now, not just our plants. She transferred money between accounts without proper documentation. Left a trail even amateur investigators could follow." Will's network expanded beyond his initial prison contacts. Former inmates who owed him favors spread rumors in criminal circles. Legitimate businesses began quietly backing away from deals with Roxanne and Luther. "The local news stations are asking questions," Sarah confirmed. "Those industry blog posts about fraudulent deals are gaining traction. Social media's picking up the story." Each piece of evidence was carefully timed and strategically placed. Nothing led back to Will. To the world, he remained a disgraced professor keeping his head down, while his targets' lives unraveled thread by thread. Hidden cameras captured their private moments, the accusations, the blame, the fear. Luther drank heavily, missing crucial meetings. Roxanne worked increasingly long hours, trying to plug the leaks in their sinking ship. She tried reaching Timothy 3 times today, Ray noted. "He's not taking her calls anymore. His people say he's reviewing their business relationship." Will coordinated everything from his motel command center. Each team member knew only their part, none seeing the full scope of his plan. He had transformed from victim to puppet master, pulling strings that made his enemies dance. The financial pressure intensified. Roxanne began shifting money between accounts desperately, while Luther's construction company faced mounting regulatory scrutiny. Their perfect life showed widening cracks. "They're fighting more," Sarah reported, monitoring their home security feeds. "Luther wants to cut losses and run. Your wife's refusing to let go." Will watch them crumble through his surveillance network. Their expensive house became a prison of paranoia. Their stolen wealth turned toxic. Each day brought new pressures, new revelations, new cracks in their facade. His revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about making them feel what he had felt. The helplessness, the betrayal, the slow, crushing weight of destruction. As Phase 1 neared completion, Will reviewed his journal. Each step had been executed perfectly. His transformation from wronged husband to architect of destruction was almost complete. "Your wife's making calls to offshore accounts," Ray reported late one night. "Luther's been meeting with criminal defense lawyers. They know something's coming. They just don't know what." Will closed his journal, a cold smile playing across his face. The setup was complete. His targets were isolated, afraid, and making fatal mistakes. Phase 2 could begin. The tools were in place. The pressure points identified. The weaknesses exposed. Now it was time to destroy them completely. Chapter 7. The trap is set. Will Freeman stood in his motel room command center, watching multiple surveillance feeds of Roxanne and Luther's crumbling world. Their once perfect life lay in ruins around them, though they hadn't yet realized the full extent of their destruction. Another investor pulled out this morning, Ray reported through the secure line. Roxanne spent 2 hours trying to damage control. No luck. Will observed his ex-wife on the monitor, her composure slipping as she made frantic phone calls. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders, the desperate edge in her gestures. "Luther's not handling it well," Ray continued. 3 meetings with criminal defense lawyers this week. "He's starting to crack." The surveillance footage showed Luther pacing in his office, phone pressed to his ear. His construction company's reputation was in tatters, contracts canceled, regulators circling like vultures. "Show me their home feeds," Will commanded. The screen shifted to their house, the one they'd bought with his stolen life. Through hidden cameras, he watched their marriage dissolve in real time. "You said you had this under control," Luther shouted, whiskey glass in hand. "Now we're losing everything." Roxanne spun on him, her mask of perfection cracking. "Me? Your sloppy construction deals are what's drawing attention. I told you to be careful with the permits." "My deals? What about your creative accounting?" "The regulators are asking questions about missing escrow funds." Will made notes in his journal as he watched them tear into each other. Sarah Chin's voice came through another secure line. "The digital breadcrumbs are working," she reported. 3 different news outlets are investigating Roxanne's real estate practices. They're following the trail exactly as we planned. And Timothy Bautista? He's running scared. Our leaks about his loan sharking operation have his criminal associates nervous. He's trying to distance himself from Roxanne and Luther. Will nodded, satisfaction coursing through him. Abigail, are you ready with the legal documentation? His new lawyer's voice was crisp and professional. Everything's prepared. The hitman's confession is authenticated. The financial records are organized, and I've prepared injunctions against their assets. We can move whenever you give the word. Through the cameras, we'll watch Roxanne and Luther's desperate attempts to save themselves. They held dinner parties trying to maintain appearances, but their social circle was shrinking. Former friends stopped accepting invitations. Business associates found excuses not to meet. Your daughter called, Ray mentioned. She says Luther's drinking more, getting angry. Should we be concerned? Increase surveillance on the house, Will ordered. If he becomes a threat to Cassie, we move immediately. But Cassie proved more than capable of handling herself. Through the cameras, Will watched his daughter navigate her home life, playing her role perfectly while gathering intelligence. Mom's been shredding documents, she reported during their secure calls. Luther caught her burning papers in the backyard at midnight. Good work, Will told her. Stay alert, but don't let them suspect anything. The pressure continued mounting. Anonymous tips led health inspectors to Luther's construction sites. Building permits were suddenly under review. Roxanne's real estate listings attracted scrutiny from regulatory boards. They're fighting about money, Ray reported. Luther wanted to liquidate assets, run to Mexico. Roxanne refused, said she wouldn't live like a fugitive. We'll watch their late-night argument through the surveillance feed. We could disappear, Luther pleaded, desperation in his voice. I have contacts, we could. I built this life. Roxanne snarled. I'm not running away like some criminal. We are criminals. Luther shouted. Everything's falling apart, and you're still in denial. Will's network of informants reported their targets' every move. Luther's visits to seedy bars, meeting with questionable characters. Roxanne's attempts to bribe officials, to silence whistleblowers. They're making mistakes, Abigail noted during their strategy session. Desperate ones. Each attempt to save themselves only digs them deeper. Will reviewed the evidence his team had gathered. Bank records showing fraudulent transfers. Documents proving the forged loan agreement. Recordings of Roxanne arranging the hit on his life. Everything needed to destroy them completely. Your wife tried reaching out to Timothy Bautista again, Sarah reported. His people shut her down hard. Said he'd go to the authorities himself if she contacted him again. Through the surveillance feeds, Will observed their isolation growing. Their phones rang less frequently. Their social invitations went unanswered. Former friends crossed the street to avoid them. Luther's getting paranoid, Ray noted. Installed new security systems, hired private guards. He knows something's coming, just doesn't know what. Will watch them retreat into their expensive house, their stolen paradise becoming a prison. Roxanne's perfect appearance showed cracks. Makeup couldn't hide the strain around her eyes. Luther's drinking increased, his temper shorter, his movements more erratic. All the pieces are in place, Abigail confirmed. The evidence is solid, the witnesses are ready. Give the word and we start the legal proceedings. Will reviewed his journal one final time, checking each phase of his plan. The trap was set perfectly. His enemies had nowhere to run, no one left to trust, not even each other. Leak the first batch of evidence to the media, he ordered. Let's show them what real betrayal feels like. Chapter 8. The Execution. The destruction of Roxanne and Luther's world began with a series of strikes. Will coordinated from his command center, orchestrating their downfall with cold efficiency. Release the financial records, he ordered Sarah. Start with the fraudulent property deals. Within hours, 3 major news outlets ran stories about suspicious real estate transactions. Anonymous sources provided documentation showing systematic fraud, money laundering, and investor deception. Will watched Roxanne's reaction through the surveillance feeds. She sat in her home office, face pale as she read the news reports. Her phone buzzed constantly, clients canceling contracts, partners distancing themselves, regulators demanding answers. Luther's not taking it well, Ray reported. He tried contacting Timothy Bautista again. Got shut down hard. The surveillance footage showed Luther's meltdown in his office. He swept everything off his desk, papers flying, before slumping into his chair with a bottle of whiskey. Your cybersecurity contact is ready, Sarah announced. We can access all of Roxanne's business servers whenever you give the word. Will nodded. Do it. Take everything. The digital assault was comprehensive. Company emails exposed systematic fraud. Financial records revealed missing client funds. Internal documents proved deliberate code violations in Luther's construction projects. The media's running with it, Abigail reported. 3 more outlets picked up the story. They're calling it the biggest real estate scandal in the city's history. We'll watch his targets unravel through multiple camera feeds. Roxanne paced her office, making desperate phone calls to damage control. Luther drank heavily, his construction empire crumbling around him. Time to release the hitman's confession, Will ordered. The recording hit the news like a bomb. The hitman's detailed account of Roxanne hiring him to kill Will, backed by phone recordings and financial transfers, sent shockwaves through the community. Police just reopened the investigation into your case, Abigail announced. They're reviewing everything. The loan fraud, the embezzlement, the murder attempt. Will observed as police cars pulled up to Roxanne's office. Through the cameras, he watched her being escorted out in handcuffs, her perfect mascara streaked with tears. Luther's trying to run, Ray reported urgently. He's at the airport, trying to book a flight to Mexico. No, Will said coldly. He doesn't get to escape. One phone call to federal authorities ensured Luther never made it past security. Will watched through airport cameras as agents surrounded his former friend, taking him into custody. Timothy Bautista's been arrested, Sarah reported. FBI raided his offices this morning. They found everything: loan sharking records, money laundering evidence, connections to organized crime. The media coverage was relentless. News vans parked outside Roxanne and Luther's homes. Former friends and associates gave interviews, distancing themselves from the scandal. Their carefully constructed social facade crumbled completely. Your daughter's safe, Ray confirmed. She's staying with her aunt until this blows over. We'll watch the police raids through multiple feeds. Officers boxed up documents from Roxanne's office. Federal agents seized computers from Luther's construction company. Their empire of lies collapsed piece by piece. In the county jail, Luther broke first. Will observed through security cameras as his former friend confessed everything to investigators. The fraud, the conspiracy, the murder plot. He's trying to make a deal, Abigail reported. Offering to testify against Roxanne in exchange for leniency. No deals, Will ordered. Make sure the prosecutors have everything. All the evidence, all the connections. I want them buried. The preliminary hearing was a media circus. Will watched from the back of the courtroom as Roxanne and Luther were led in wearing prison jumpsuits. Their eyes met his briefly. He saw the moment they realized who had orchestrated their destruction. Please, Luther mouthed, reaching toward Will as guards led him past. I'm sorry. Will turned away, his face hard. Sorry meant nothing. Forgiveness wasn't in his vocabulary anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, witness testimony, digital forensics, a mountain of proof showing years of fraud and criminal conspiracy. The hitman's testimony about the murder plot sealed their fate. The prosecutors offering 30 years, Abigail reported. No possibility of early release. Will nodded, satisfaction coursing through him as he watched his enemies crumble. Their expensive lawyers couldn't save them. Their social connections abandoned them. They faced their fate alone, just as they had left him. Final phase, Will ordered his team. Release everything to the media. Show the world exactly who they really are. The complete story hit the news, the betrayal, the frame-up, the murder plot. Will's name was cleared completely. Public opinion swung hard, condemning Roxanne and Luther while hailing Will as a victim of terrible injustice. Chapter 9. The Resolution. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison prepared to deliver the sentence. Will sat in the gallery, watching his former wife and best friend standing before the bench in Prison Orange. The crimes committed by the defendants show a level of calculated cruelty that this court rarely sees, the judge declared. The systematic fraud, the false imprisonment of an innocent man, and the attempted murder plot demonstrate a complete disregard for human dignity. Will observed Roxanne's perfect posture finally breaking as the judge continued. Luther swayed slightly, his face ashen. Therefore, this court sentences each defendant to 35 years in federal prison. Additionally, all assets gained through criminal activity will be seized and restituted to their victims. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom. Will watched without expression as guards led Roxanne and Luther away. Their eyes sought his one final time. Roxanne's filled with desperate plea, Luther's with broken resignation. Will turned away from them both. Their fate was sealed, their destruction complete. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded him. "Mr. Freeman, how does it feel to be exonerated?" "The truth always comes out," Will replied simply. "Justice has been served." Abigail met him at her office afterward to handle the paperwork. "The restitution orders are being processed. You'll receive full compensation for all financial damages." "The money doesn't matter," Will said. "Making them pay was what mattered." His lawyers studied him carefully. "They'll never recover from this. Their reputations are destroyed, their assets seized, their freedom gone. Was it worth it?" Will's face remained impassive. "They tried to destroy me. Tried to take my life, my freedom, my daughter. There's no forgiveness for that." Later, he met Cassie at a small cafe away from the media attention. His daughter had grown stronger through the ordeal, her innocence replaced by hard-won wisdom. "What happens now, Dad?" "We start over," Will replied. "Somewhere new, away from all this." Cassie nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Mom tried to call me from jail. I didn't answer." "Good. She made her choice. She has to live with it." Will had already arranged their fresh start, a house in a different city, new opportunities, a clean slate. The betrayal had changed him, transformed him from a trusting teacher into someone harder, someone who understood the true face of human nature. His network of contacts gradually dispersed, their roles in his revenge complete. Each received their promised payment, their connections severed cleanly. "One last thing," Ray reported during their final meeting. "Luther tried to send you a letter from prison. Want me to get rid of it?" "Burn it," Will ordered. "The past is dead." He sold the house he'd once shared with Roxanne, erasing all traces of his old life. The gentle professor who had trusted too easily was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more ruthless, more aware of humanity's capacity for betrayal. Local media portrayed him as a victim who had triumphed over injustice. We'll let them tell that story. It served his purposes. But he knew the truth was darker, more complex. He had become what circumstances demanded, a man capable of destroying his enemies completely without mercy or hesitation. The final piece of evidence, his revenge journal, he burned page by page. Its purpose was fulfilled, its detailed plans executed perfectly. What remained was a new future, unmarked by the past's shadows. As Will and Cassie prepared to leave town, he took one last look at the city that had witnessed his transformation. The betrayal had broken the man he was, but from those shattered pieces emerged someone stronger, someone who would never be vulnerable again. "Ready?" Cassie asked, understanding in her eyes. Will nodded, turning away from the past. He had won, not just survived, but triumphed. His enemies were destroyed, his name cleared, his daughter safe beside him. The cost had been his old self, his capacity for trust, his belief in human goodness. A fair trade, he decided, for the power to protect what mattered and punish those who deserved it. The old Will Freeman was truly gone. In his place stood someone new, someone forged in betrayal's fire, tempered by revenge, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He had become the master of his own fate, and he would never be betrayed again. #Epilogue. 10 years later, Will Freeman stood at the window of his corner office in Boston, watching the city bustle below. At 52, his hair had touches of gray at the temples, but his physique remained strong, maintained by the same disciplined routine he'd developed in prison. The prestigious Williams College History Department had been eager to hire him 5 years ago. His published works on historical revenge societies had earned him a reputation as a leading expert in the field. On his desk sat a newspaper clipping from his old hometown. Roxanne Lang Freeman, now simply Roxanne Lang again, had been denied parole for the third time. The board cited her continued lack of remorse as the primary factor. 25 years remained on her sentence. Will's phone buzzed, a text from Cassie. Dad, remember Jennifer's graduation is next weekend? Sarah says you better not miss your granddaughter walking. A small smile crossed his face. Cassie, now 26, had built a successful life in Seattle. Her cybersecurity firm, built partially with skills learned from Sarah Chin, specialized in protecting small businesses from fraud. She'd married a software developer named Michael Ross, and their daughter Jennifer had become the light of Will's life. The lessons of betrayal hadn't been lost on Cassie. She'd grown into a formidable woman, careful with trust but fiercely protective of those who earned it. She never spoke of Roxanne, had never visited her in prison. As far as Cassie was concerned, her mother had died the day Will was arrested. Will's desk phone buzzed. Dr. Freeman, Ray Lynch is here to see you. Send him in. Ray had aged well. His private investigation business, thriving after Will's case, made him a reputation. He still did occasional work for Will, keeping tabs on various players from their shared past. Luther died last night, Ray announced without preamble. Prison heart attack. Apparently, he'd been declining for months. Will absorbed the news without visible reaction. Luther had received 35 years, but had served only 10. Death had granted him an early release. Any last messages? Will asked, though he already knew the answer. Same as always. He tried writing you again last month. Still begging for forgiveness. Will turned back to the window. Luther had written regularly for the first few years, each letter filled with apologies and explanations. Each one had been returned unopened or burned unread. Will's capacity for forgiveness had died in that prison cell a decade ago. What about Timothy Bautista? Still in witness protection. After rolling over on his criminal network, he couldn't survive on the outside. Lives in Arizona under a new name, working as a car salesman if you can believe it. Will nodded. Bautista had cut a deal, trading information for a reduced sentence. He'd served 5 years and emerged to find his criminal empire dismantled, his connections gone. Will had made sure of that. And our old team? Ray settled into a chair, pulling out his tablet. Sarah Chin's running her own cybersecurity consulting firm in Singapore. Very successful, very legitimate. She still sends Christmas cards. Will glanced at the digital photo frame on his desk. Sarah had attended Cassie's wedding 3 years ago, one of the few connections from that time he'd maintained. Mike Chin got out last year, Ray continued. His sister set him up with a job at her company. He's staying clean, doing computer system audits for banks. The forger, Marcus Rodriguez, gone legitimate too. Does art restoration in Chicago. He's got a gallery showing next month. Will absorb the information with a nod. The network he'd built for his revenge had scattered across the globe, most of them transitioning to legal enterprises. He kept loose tabs on them through Ray, ensuring none would ever become a threat. Abigail's firm is handling Jennifer's trust fund paperwork, Will mentioned. She's made partner now. Abigail Escobar had parlayed her role in exposing the corruption into a stellar legal career. She specialized in defending wrongly accused clients, using many of the techniques they developed during Will's revenge. Patty Lopez retired last year, Ray added. Still feels guilty about not seeing through Roxanne's scheme. Will's first lawyer had sent him a long letter after the truth emerged, apologizing for her failure to prevent his conviction. He'd responded briefly, acknowledging that Roxanne and Luther's deception had fooled many people, but he never hired her services again. The door opened and Will's teaching assistant entered with a stack of papers. Dr. Freeman, your lectures for next semester's course on historical justice systems need review. Thank you, David. Will took the papers, noting the top page. Revenge as Restoration. Historical Perspectives on Personal Justice. After Ray left, Will reviewed his upcoming lectures. His academic focus on historical revenge practices had earned him international recognition. Universities regularly invited him to speak about justice systems throughout history, never realizing they were hosting a man who had orchestrated one of the most complete acts of personal revenge in recent memory. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Cassie. Dad, Jennifer's asking about her middle name again. Should I tell her the story? Will paused. Jennifer's middle name was Rachel, after Ray's sister who had died during their revenge operation. A random car accident, unrelated to their plans, but it had cemented Ray's commitment to destroying those who preyed on others. The name served as a reminder that revenge, however justified, carried unexpected costs. Later that evening, Will drove to his home in the Berkshires, a modernist structure of glass and steel that bore no resemblance to his old life. His housekeeper, Maria, had left dinner in the warmer. She worked for him 3 days a week, vetted thoroughly by Ray's agency like everyone who entered Will's life now. As he ate, Will reviewed the latest intelligence report from Ray's firm. Roxanne's prison communications remained monitored, though she had largely given up trying to contact the outside world. Her last visitor had been 3 years ago, a true crime writer researching a book about the case. Will had ensured the author received all the documented evidence, guaranteeing the book portrayed events accurately. His home office contained a hidden safe, inside which lay copies of all the evidence that had destroyed Roxanne and Luther. Digital backups existed in multiple secure locations. Will had learned never to discard leverage, no matter how complete the victory seemed. The next morning, he taught his graduate seminar on historical power structures. His students, eager young minds pursuing their doctorates, debated the role of personal justice in societies with corrupt legal systems. Will guided the discussion dispassionately, never revealing his intimate knowledge of the subject. During lunch, he spoke with Jennifer via video chat. His granddaughter, barely 5, showed him her latest artwork, a family portrait that included only her parents, herself, and Grandpa Will. She had no knowledge of her other grandmother, and Will intended to keep it that way as long as possible. "When are you coming to visit?" Jennifer asked, her face filling the screen. "Next weekend for your graduation," Will reminded her. "I've got your present already picked out." After the call, Will received an encrypted email from Sarah Chen. Her regular security sweeps had flagged some concerning chatter, former associates of Timothy Bautista asking questions about Will's past. Though Bautista himself remained cowed, others from his old organization occasionally probed for weaknesses. Will forwarded the information to Ray with a single instruction: handle it. He had learned to take no chances with potential threats. The network he'd built for revenge now served to protect what he'd rebuilt. Any hint of danger was eliminated quietly, efficiently, and completely. That evening, he attended a faculty dinner where the discussion turned to a recent case of corporate whistleblowing. His colleagues debated the ethics of exposure versus loyalty. Will contributed occasionally, offering historical perspectives while keeping his personal insights hidden. But surely, one professor argued, revenge serves no constructive purpose in a civilized society. Will sipped his wine, thinking of Roxanne in her prison cell, of Luther's fatal heart attack, of Timothy Bautista living in fear under an assumed name. "Revenge," he replied carefully, "is neither constructive nor destructive. It simply is. Like gravity, it exists whether we approve or not. The real question is how it shapes both the avenger and the target." Later that night, Will received his weekly report from the prison system's database. Roxanne had attempted to send another letter, this one addressed to Jennifer. Like all her previous attempts to contact her granddaughter, it would vanish before reaching its destination. Will's phone lit up with a text from Cassie. "Got the quarterly trust fund statement? Pretty aggressive investment strategy, Dad." He smiled slightly. The trust fund for Jennifer, now worth several $1,000,000, had been built partially from the seized assets of Roxanne and Luther's criminal empire. A fitting use for their ill-gotten gains, Will thought. The next morning, he met with his department chair to discuss the upcoming publication of his latest book, Justice Outside the Law: Historical Perspectives on Personal Vengeance. The publisher had already ordered a substantial first printing, expecting strong academic and popular interest. "Your personal experience with wrongful conviction adds such authenticity to your work," the chair commented. Will nodded, acknowledging the statement without revealing how deep that authenticity ran. His academic career had become the perfect cover. Who would suspect a respected historian of having orchestrated one of the most complete acts of personal revenge in recent memory? That afternoon, he received an update from Abigail about some minor legal matters. She had become one of the few people from that time he still trusted, her commitment to justice aligning with his own transformed worldview. The last appeal was denied, she reported. Roxanne's conviction stands with no possibility of review. Will thanked her briefly, then turned to preparing for his upcoming trip to Seattle. Jennifer's preschool graduation was a minor event in the grand scheme, but he had learned to value these moments of normal family life. His revenge had cost him his old self, his capacity for easy trust, his belief in simple justice. But it had given him something else, a cold clarity about human nature, an appreciation for power carefully wielded, and most importantly, the ability to protect what mattered to him now. As he packed for Seattle, Will reflected on the decade since his revenge reached its completion. He had rebuilt his life on his own terms, successful in ways his old self could never have imagined. His academic career provided both cover and satisfaction. His relationship with Cassie had grown stronger through shared understanding of betrayal's lessons. Jennifer represented a future unmarred by the past's shadows. The betrayal had transformed him from a trusting academic into someone harder, colder, more capable. That transformation had exacted its price, but had also granted him power he'd never dreamed of possessing. His network, though largely dormant, remained ready to activate at any sign of threat to his new life. Will Freeman, once a gentle history professor, had become a living example of historical revenge fulfilled. His enemies were destroyed or dead. His name was cleared and respected. His family was protected. The cost had been his old self, but he considered that a fair exchange for the power to ensure such betrayal would never touch him or his loved ones again. The man who had emerged from that crucible of betrayal and vengeance stood stronger, more resolute, and absolutely certain of his path forward. He had become the master of his own fate, and he intended to keep it that way. As night fell over the Berkshires, Will stood at his window, gazing at the lights of the city below. Somewhere in a federal prison, Roxanne Lang sat in her cell, her dreams of wealth and status reduced to concrete walls and steel bars. Luther's body lay in the prison morgue, his betrayal ending not with redemption, but with lonely death. Timothy Bautista lived his borrowed life in Arizona, jumping at shadows. Will's phone buzzed one final time, Cassie sending a photo of Jennifer trying on her graduation outfit. The image brought a rare, genuine smile to his face. This was what he had fought for, what his revenge had ultimately protected. The chance for a new generation to grow up free from betrayal's poison. The gentle professor had died in that prison cell a decade ago. The man who emerged, harder, colder, unforgiving, had built something stronger from the ashes of betrayal. He had become someone who could not be betrayed, could not be broken, could not be defeated. And he would keep it that way, no matter the cost. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.